What is the theme for the new 30 years? What will be the subject of study for this era? In the last 30 years of reform and opening up, that era's topic was poverty alleviation, moving towards a moderately prosperous society, right? The Chinese people didn't have many other desires. Living in peace and contentment was the highest life ideal for the Chinese people, wasn't it? Not everyone can become wealthy, and after 30 years, that has become clear. In the past, everyone dreamed of getting rich, but then, after wave of reform, most people were thrown into disadvantaged groups, and they finally gave up the delusion of getting rich. So, isn't striving for peace and contentment the highest ideal for the Chinese? But living in peace and contentment also has prerequisites. There must be social justice. Have you heard about the bus in Chongqing that fell off the cliff? How did that happen? It was just a passenger, a middle-aged woman, who got into a fight with the driver, right? The driver had the lives of all the passengers in his hands with that steering wheel. She fights with him, but not a single passenger gets up to stop it. It doesn't concern them, they hang up high, it's not their business, no one speaks up. What's the consequence of no one speaking up? Everyone dies, a tragedy. If I had been in that bus, I definitely would have stepped in. I would have said, right now, regardless of who is right or wrong between you two, the lives of everyone on this bus are more important. If I had raised my voice, I think others would agree and join me. Clearly at the time, there was no bigger issue than the collective safety of the bus passengers. Anyone with common sense would see that. It was just morally wrong, 1, to choose to ignore that, and 2, not to speak up, stop the fighting and let's talk later. As a result, everyone got killed unjustly. There are too many such facts nowadays. And the most prominent phenomenon recently is what? Wage claims. As a result, wage claims may now be classified as malicious wage claims. The government's stance is clear, right? Claiming wages may bring about social instability, but the premise is, why is there a wage claim in the first place? You owe wages, right? If you owe wages and I go to claim them, there are two types. One is called a good faith claim, the other is called a malicious claim. But who was malicious first? The employer who owes the wages was malicious first, right? These are real social conflicts that cannot be avoided. They test our government officials' principles. Which side do you stand on? You can't dodge it, so there is only one way to bring labor-capital conflicts into the legal framework. The working class has the legitimate right to protect its interests, and unions should be legal. Labor-capital conflicts in the West have never stopped. They occur within the legal framework. A fight, how to fight? Within the legal framework. They form trade unions, for instance at an airport, right? Then the airport workers suddenly find their wages haven't gone up, but prices have, and their material living standards have severely dropped. What do? The trade union, the airport union, announces a strike. Announcing a strike is interesting. They announce a 3-day strike and make it clear that it's 3 days. Why explain clearly that it is 3 days? To let the capitalist class calculate how much they will lose in those 3 days. Later the management realizes it's bearable, so they won't give in, won't go to the negotiation table. But when the 3 days are up, and the strike is extended for a week, they continue to calculate their losses. Eventually, they realize it's not sustainable, they go to the negotiation table, and after negotiations, wages are increased, and the workers start working again, quite happily, thinking about where to go for fun, where to travel during the holiday. This is the lifestyle and living conditions of the working class in so-called developed countries in Europe. The union is thus a recognized entity in the legal framework. The only way for China's labor-capital relations in the future is to follow the path of the rule of law, in a legal framework. All these show that a rule of law society must be constructed. It's the same saying, modernization encompasses three aspects: industrialization, market economy, and rule of law society. This involves matters of thought and cultural spirit, which is an issue for the modern transformation of China. A rule of law society is a civil society in which there are independent personalities. If there are no independent personalities, there is no need of rule of law. How to foster independent individual personalities and conscientious moral agents in China. Now, let us delve into the fourth aspect we are addressing today. After the initial 30 years of reform and opening up, characterized by Deng Xiaoping's vision to eradicate widespread poverty and strive towards a moderately prosperous society, we find ourselves facing a much more challenging and demanding topic in the present era. This topic revolves around two crucial reconstructions: the reconstruction of our spiritual homeland and the reconstruction of social justice. This is the juncture at which Chinese history currently stands, and if we can successfully accomplish these two reconstructions, it will genuinely signify the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. Liang Qichou, died 1929, wrote the article called The Young China in 1900. This article was included in the Liang Qichou Reader that I had previously compiled. Recently I recompiled it and got Shanghai Far East Publishing House to publish it, with a new title, Morality and Young China. The article written by Mr. Liang Qichou when it first came out created a nationwide sensation. Our Chinese nation has a history of several thousand years, and what have we been all along? Starting from Emperor Qin Shi Huang, 3rd century BCE, centralizing political system and power structure, we have not fundamentally deviated from it to this day. For so long, we have been an old empire, and then Liang said that we are actually very young. Why are we very young? Because we must modernize. We are a latecomer to modernization, forced into the process of modernization. In terms of the modernization process, we are so young, practically adolescent. The so-called modernization of China is to change the old empire to a young China. This is the modernization of China. It is still China, but it has finally become young. All the civilizational achievements we have made as an old empire, all the experience and knowledge we have accumulated as an old empire, should be renewed and transformed into a young China. This is the path we either are on or must take now. We say Britain is old, indeed it is old. We talk about the old imperialist powers, with capitalism developing very maturely, starting with the Netherlands, then moving to Britain. Britain later became incredibly powerful, right? The empire with the most colonies in the world, the empire on which the sun never sets. The old colonialists finally exited the stage of history. Nations must be independent, ethnic groups must be liberated, and the people must revolutionize. This was Mao Ze Dong's basic judgment of the international community after World War II. The third sentence was wrong, the first two were completely correct. Nations must be independent, ethnic groups must be liberated, but the people did not revolutionize. So, this is the state of affairs that we are currently at. So, China is also an independent country, but on the path of modernization, it is still relatively young. Being young is a positive thing. It means putting an end to the old imperial system and transforming into a youthful China, with a new appearance and a fresh mindset. These are the things that need to be done in order to truly become a youthful China. The most crucial aspect of this endeavor is the modern reconstruction of Chinese cultural spirit. How can this reconstruction be achieved? In fact, we have made a great effort in this regard in history, the Neo-Confucianism of the Song and Ming dynasties. The pinnacle of intellectual development in China, the fifth stage, was the rise of Neo-Confucianism during the Song and Ming dynasties. The first stage began with the discussions of the pre-Qin philosophers, 8th to 3rd century BCE. In the second stage, the Han Dynasty, 3rd century BCE to 3rd century CE, established the Confucian classics as the dominant school of thought, dismissing the various other schools of philosophy. Emperor Wu of Han, a political leader, and Dong Zhongshu, a prominent thinker, worked together to elevate Confucianism and establish its supremacy. From then on, the orthodox Confucian tradition has been established in China, and even today, Chinese people are still influenced by Confucianism, without a doubt. What happened after the decline of the Han Dynasty's classical scholarship? The late Eastern Han period was marked by chaos and the Three Kingdoms strife, followed by the Wei and Jin dynasties, 3rd to 6th century CE, during which Taoism was revived. At that time, Chinese intellectuals lost faith in Confucianism and turned to Taoist teachings in an attempt to seek personal salvation amidst the turbulent times. This gave rise to Weijin metaphysics. The rise of Weijin metaphysics symbolized the decline of China's cultural vitality. Subsequently, we had the opportunity for self-redemption, as Buddhism emerged, bringing with it the thoughts and wisdom of Siddhartha Gautama, which had originated from ancient India. The philosophy and wisdom of Buddhism greatly inspired the Chinese people, marking the fourth stage of intellectual development known as Suitang, 6th to 10th century CE, Buddhism. This fourth stage is of great significance, and Zen Buddhism represents the highest achievement of Buddhism's Sinicization in China. Zen Buddhism is guided by two principles. The first principle is that each individual must rely on themselves to attain enlightenment. There is no savior in the world. We must awaken our own inherent nature, perceive our true essence, and achieve Buddhahood. It emphasizes the realization of one's own mind and nature, believing that each person possesses a spiritual subjectivity and inherent Buddha nature. By recognizing one's own Buddha nature, one can attain Buddhahood through self-realization. This principle is known as self-enlightenment. The second principle is based on the idea that since every individual possesses Buddha nature, all sentient beings are equal. This provided the ideological groundwork for the revival of Chinese cultural vitality through Neo-Confucianism, 11th to 16th century CE, during the Song and Ming dynasties. The notion of equality among all beings paved the way for the revitalization of Chinese culture. What is the thought behind Neo-Confucianism during the Song and Ming dynasties? It aims to rescue China's declining cultural vitality. Where does the root of China's cultural decline lie? It lies in the culture of master-slave relationships. Chinese people have a tendency toward servitude, and unless this servile nature is completely overcome and the master-slave relationship is shattered, the cultural vitality of China cannot be saved. Neo-Confucianism during the Song and Ming dynasties can be divided into two schools, the Qingzhou school of rationalistic Confucianism and the Luoang school of mind-heart Confucianism. While these schools engaged in debates, their goal was the same: to establish morally conscientious individuals in China, in other words, independent personalities. This was an Enlightenment movement initiated by the Chinese people, a spiritual movement of modern times. If Neo-Confucianism during the Song and Ming dynasties had achieved its goals, China would have entered the principles of modernity at that time. Every Chinese individual would have been a morally conscientious subject with a fully independent personality. However, these goals were not realized as the movement prematurely aborted. Why do we revisit the teachings of Wang Yangming's mind-heart Confucianism today? It is because the goal that mind-conscious Confucianism sought to achieve, namely, the prevalence of independent personalities throughout China, was not then accomplished. Wang Yangming stated that everyone's heart has monsters. It is easy to defeat monsters in the mountains, but difficult to defeat them within one's own heart. These internal monsters within the heart refer to the servile nature. The core of Wang Yangming's philosophy is encapsulated in 3 words: Zhi Liang Zai, maximize one's good conscience. If we inherently possess good conscience, why is there a need to realize it? To put it another way, let's understand what conscience is and what Zhi Liang Zhi means. There's a saying by Confucius that is well known in China and around the world: what you do not wish for yourself, do not do to others. Not wishing something for yourself is conscience, and not imposing it on others is Zhi Liang Zhi, practice of good conscience. If you wouldn't want your superior to treat you in a certain way, that is something you don't need to be taught, right? You can't stand it yourself, right? That's your conscience speaking. You can't accept or tolerate your superior treating you that way, and that's your conscience. Where is the need for teaching there? Then, not treating your subordinates in the same way that you wouldn't want to be treated is called Zhi Liang Zhi. But there are such people who believe that it is only right and proper for their superiors to treat them in a certain way because they are the superiors, and they are the subordinates. This thinking equates to seeing themselves as slaves to their masters, and they accept such treatment. It's not that their conscience is gone, but that it is obscured, and what obscures it? Servility. Hence, the theme of Yangming's philosophy of the mind is Zhi Liang Zhi. Those who believe it is natural for superiors to treat them in a certain way will surely treat their subordinates as slaves. In front of their subordinates, they become the masters. Isn't it true that anyone with a servile attitude will act this way? For thousands of years, the culture of master-servant relationships in China persisted. Why do servants obey their masters? There are reasons. There are ethical relationships. The master ensures the servant's livelihood, which depends on the master's benevolence, and if the master truly provides, then obedience follows. This has been the culture of master-servant relationships for thousands of years. In such a circumstance, can this nation be creative? It will not be creative. Will it possess true virtue and creativity? Neither will be present. This is called the decline of cultural life. Therefore, Wang Yangming stated that every Chinese person, whether a foot soldier or a street peddler, is a great hero when he takes charge of his spirit and makes his own decisions. There will definitely be differences in status. In society, one may be at the very bottom or at the very top. Regardless of whether you are at the top or the bottom, you should organize your spirit and make your own decisions, as an independent personality and a morally self-aware subject. Chinese people have always had morals, but the morality of Chinese people has traditionally not stemmed from an inner self-awareness but rather from forced obedience to external authority and consideration of the personal own interests. This is not self-discipline, it is heteronomy. If this does not change, there is no hope for the nation. This is a fundamental issue. Therefore, the reconstruction of the cultural spirit of China in the 21st century is to inherit the unfinished business of Yangming's philosophy of good conscience and practice. We need to establish independent personality in China, to truly follow the principle of do not impose on others what you yourself do not desire. By removing this servile mentality, we are initiating a movement of thought. This is why, over the years, we have seen an interesting phenomenon where all walks of life are beginning to pay attention to Yangming's philosophy. Many years ago, I forget exactly when, entrepreneurs in Beijing organized something online, a Zhi Liang Zhi Sihiyuan, or Good Conscience community. Have you heard of it? This online community represents an important step in the growth process of Chinese private entrepreneurs. We had relied on political power to launch our businesses, and we made money, right? But having made money to this extent, we wonder whether the future is sustainable. What will sustainability depend on? It depends on us consciously assuming social responsibility. And where do we obtain the intellectual material, the resources for thought, to do so? From Wang Yangming's philosophy of mind and practice. So, they take it very seriously. On their online platforms, they do their homework every day. Before going to sleep, they review how they did that day. Because Yang Ming's philosophy of mind is about cultivating one's good conscience, reflecting on the missteps in one's life and emotions, and removing them. This is called the practice of cultivating the good conscience in the philosophy of mind and practice, and it is very meaningful. People from cities all over the country have joined, and this platform has become quite large. What is it like now? It has gone quiet. There seems to be a problem. I don't know what had happened. Then they had held an offline exchange, singing songs together, singing the song of the motherland, and placing their hands over their left chest, singing with tears in their eyes. I thought, there is hope for Chinese private entrepreneurs. They know that they have an important responsibility in Chinese social life. They have taken on this responsibility. What a good movement. The rise of Yang Ming's philosophy of mind and practice is inevitable. Then, facing modern capital and technological civilization, we have to rebuild, not just copy. The present moment demands its own approach to cultivating the mind. How do we face the capital market? How do we face the development of private enterprises? For example, you can trade stocks as a follower of Yang Ming's philosophy of mind, and then it's different. You know why you trade stocks, right? To help build the country. Indeed, you are correct. In the era of financial capitalism, this is how the system operates. As capitalism evolves and a functioning financial system emerges, the capital market plays a crucial role in efficiently allocating production resources. It becomes a matter of focusing on the capital market. Which industries are emerging as sunrise industries, representing the future of development? Capitalism inherently requires continuous adjustments to industrial structures, as it is a fundamental characteristic of the capitalist mode of production. Emerging industries often face a shortage of funds, while some industries become sunset industries and experience overcapacity. The question then arises, should funds still be concentrated in these declining sectors? How can this be managed? The answer lies in the capital market. The capital market serves as a marketized mechanism within the broader social mechanisms, facilitating the necessary adjustments and resource allocation. Then you join in. Why? Even if your money is not much, only 500,000 or 600,000, although the principal is too small, it still contributes to the country's construction. You realize that this industry should rise, right? But it is seriously underfunded, so you buy its stock. Then many people realize this and start buying this stock, and the stock value goes up, right? Once the stock value has increased, why stay there? Other areas still need your help. By moving from here to there, aren't you practicing the philosophy of mind? Your joy does not come from getting it right every time you buy stock and then appreciating in value. Where does it come from? From every time you successfully helped build the country. That's called Dharma joy, a Buddhist term. Do you believe it or not? Of course, I believe that the stock market is like this, as are the funds, insurance, and the banking industry. I recently discussed with bankers, and they are still subject to KPIs, right? Performance assessments. They are at their wits' end because why? They can't lend out money, nobody wants to borrow, you know. I think about it, and I wouldn't want to borrow your money either. Suppose I am a manufacturing enterprise, and I don't even have orders, how can I stand to borrow money from you? I still have to pay interest and return it to you, right? No need. So the money can't be lent out. How do you assess these KPIs? It's difficult for them, they ask me, and I say you've already made a lot of money over these years, that's enough, now take a break. Your banks should mainly serve the real economy, and you need to make concessions. Making concessions to the real economy is your way of existence today. All previous assessment indicators should be removed. They listen and think it makes sense, but it seems unrealistic. They haven't woken up, you know? Not yet awakened. They definitely have to make concessions to the real economy. You took too much before. By the time the capital finally invested in the real economy after going through your hands, it had already generated a round of profits, right? The profits on the ground haven't yet been generated, and a portion has already been taken out by the people in the capital markets, right? All pocketed. How is that acceptable? Study the philosophy of good conscience. They ask me which book to read. I say Wang Yangming's book on mind and practice. Practice every day. The key is the practice itself. Practice every day, expand your good conscience, that's correct. Due to time constraints, and to leave time for interaction with everyone, I will stop here.